A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Cecilia Landholt. Cecilia is an executive coach, and she's a culture advisor for growing startups. Cecilia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be chatting with you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You actually came highly recommended from someone that we'd featured on the show. I mean, it's got to be over a year ago. But Chad Sanderson, we work with him. He's a fantastic guy. And we're really grateful for him to, putting us in touch with you to talk about today this idea that CEO and executive coaching can really affect company culture on a deeper level than just the programs and processes. It goes much deeper than that. And I'm excited to get into today's topic. But before we do, Cecilia, maybe you can tell our listeners a little about sort of what you've been up to these days.
Yeah, of course. So I work directly with startup CEOs and other executives as well, but mostly startup CEOs. I've been in the startup space since 2010, and I started studying culture and a very, very long time ago. And after I started iterating it and doing different programs and processes and helping startups grow, I realized that working with CEOs actually had the biggest return on culture. And now today I get to work with them directly to work through their beliefs, their identity, and kind of coach them in a way that isn't just, let's make a to-do list, let's make, your dream list and figure out how we get from A to B. It's a lot deeper than that. It's more around the world of, hey, what actually caused you to make that decision? What let you know to make that decision? And are those decisions that you want to be making? Is that the experience you want to be having? And seeing how that has impacted company culture has been really eye-opening and super fun. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Perfect. And you just mentioned, it's been eye-opening and fun, but you'd also said before we even started recording today that you're sort of living your dream job. And I think that's so incredible and encouraging. And it also, the people that are so passionate about what they're doing, they definitely bring a level of expertise, a level of enthusiasm to what they do. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to sort of tap into your expertise today. So like you said, this can go the CEO, the executive coaching, and as it relates to company culture, it can run deeper than the basic programs and processes that people may think of going through the motions. Where are we going to start? I think today we're going to start with sort of about how that relates to the structure of the unwritten rules of company culture. Yeah.
So, a lot of CEOs that I've talked to before, and I've talked to CEOs who are 26 and in their 30s and in their 40s, some who are in their 50s. And it's really fascinating because some CEOs don't realize when they walk into the office that vibe they give off or the energy they give off. And I know that sometimes that can be a taboo kind of thing to say, but, it's that attitude and those belief systems really structure what's going on with company culture. When you have values that are written down, but the CEO is acting in a completely different way, the way the CEO is acting is going to shine through with the values. And those written values that are on the wall are going to be meaningless unless the CEO is actually really committed to those values and it's their values as well. So those patterning and values are they come through in so many different ways. And being on an executive team when I was doing people operations and company culture work was really interesting because, you're talking to a slew of different people, and you're watching them say, okay, yes, we're going to do this. No, we're not going to do this. And they have to collectively decide as a group. But as a CEO, you hold that weight. And you see how these different leadership styles shine through. So some CEOs and startup founders, they don't really realize how their leadership styles influence not just, the executive team or this decision, but how it influences the entire group, how that decision then affects the CRO and the VP of engineering and the design and this and that, and then how those decisions trickle down. So and I say unwritten rules of company culture, because, we see day to day how values are posted on the wall. And I'm sure lots of people work at companies and they see those values, and those values aren't being lived out at all. And, other companies, you see values written on the wall and you see them lived out, through the decisions, through, you see it at the company barbecue and you see it at the board meeting. And when you see those differences, it really all goes back to the CEO or the founder. Sometimes they're different people. So I always say CEO and or startup founder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting that you had mentioned that sometimes there can be this disconnect or disparity between the written rules of company culture and what's actually being put into practice.
Yeah.
Do you have any pieces of advice in terms of assessing whether there is a disconnect? I mean, it definitely, I guess you can even start with the best intentions or think one thing of yourself in the way that you lead your team or you approach business. And then, but in practice, it doesn't map to the same place, or in practice over the years, you've started to stray, and, maybe that's not even a bad thing. Maybe, there is a time to adjust and look at, well, do the current rules still reflect my current values?
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually always tell CEOs that even when values are on the wall, that doesn't mean they're permanent, right? Like, as we grow up through the years, our values that we had when we were 17 are probably a lot different than they are today, right? So iterating, constantly looking at those values, is that the same value that we had 5 years ago? Sure. Is that a value that we want to keep having? Maybe not. And actually, that self-awareness is really, really helpful, because some people have these values on the wall and they've been there for 10 years, and it's like, no, you guys aren't a 13-person company working in 2 rooms in a basement anymore. You guys are 100 people and things are bustling. Maybe it's time to reiterate those values. And they sometimes people give me that, like, what do you mean face? And well, hey, like, you're operating at a different level now. And how great is that? Let's celebrate that success. And, changing values or iterating them isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's, how are you operating now? How are you a different person now? And let's celebrate that and make sure that the actual values, that are shining through are actually on the wall for everyone else to see.
Yeah. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. So, all right, let's move on to sort of this second point about founders, CEOs, executives, and becoming self-aware. I'm interested in this.
Yeah. So, one thing I realized, because I used to do, I would start onboarding programs and help companies put together survey systems. And it was really interesting, doing this type of work and having groups get super involved in it. But if the CEO wasn't behind it, or the CEO was like, yeah, okay, this will be helpful, we'll see, it really wouldn't take off. And I realized that working directly with a CEO on coaching got a much higher return, because they started seeing, oh, wow, like, I am anxious with this, or I do get really short-tempered with this, or I might work too late, and now everyone's working too late on a Friday type of deal. And I realized the more they became self-aware, the more they realized their little tics or their patterning or their belief systems, then that started to influence the rest of the group. So, and then they also got to decide, okay, do you want to keep doing this? Is this something that has been going on for so many years that you don't know any other way and to work, but is this exactly what you want? My first question with clients is always, what would you like? What would you like your experience to be? Because we can decide at any point, what we would like our experience to be. And then we can move forward from there. How do we shape that? How do we reach for that? Because you can't reach for what you don't know that you want. And so we have to map all that out. And a lot of CEOs know that they want to get to the next point, or they want to, get this feedback. And when we start working together, they start realizing, oh, okay, like I talk to my CEO like this, but I talk to my CRO like this, and I talk to my VP of engineering like this. And now I see where there's all this discrepancy and dissonance and things like that. And they can actually start putting the puzzle pieces together, which is super, super fun to watch with clients. It's one of my favorite things to have them come back after a few sessions and say, oh yeah, I was talking to my co-founder and it was totally different. I was having a conversation I would have had 3 weeks ago, and I would have been flying off the rails. And this was just a 15-minute conversation. We were able to get it done and move on to the next thing, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to have a 15-minute conversation, get it done, and move on to my next thing. And, I'm always high-fiving people. So it's always a high-five moment.
Yeah.
When that happens.
Yeah. So Cecilia, I'm curious. I think this question kind of relates to, at least tangentially, this idea of becoming more self-aware. What would you say is there a dividing line between maybe the beliefs and way in which you live your life personally overlaps with how you project your beliefs and company culture professionally? I mean, does there have to be two different things? I mean, can there be overlap? Can they be one and the same? I mean, I kind of grew up in this, I felt, environment of, okay, there's your personal life and then there's your professional life, and they don't necessarily overlap. But now, I mean, so much of our lives are online and recorded and out there, and people are putting more of a premium on, there's real people behind this company. It's not just a faceless company. It's not B2C or B2B. It's P2P. It's people to people. So you should put that out there. So I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of that overlap.
Yeah. And I actually just think we are living life. When you hear about work-life balance, I don't think there's work-life balance at all. I think there's just life. And it's a balancing act 100% of the time. So regardless of whether you're at work, you're at home, you're with your kids, you don't have any kids, you're going for runs, you're on a constant trying to figure out what would I like to do next. And that's why I love the work that I do, because I've had some people reach out to me and they're like, well, I just want to work on the work stuff. I don't need to talk about home life. I don't need to talk about any of that. And I end up telling them, well, we're going to talk about that. I hate to break it to you, but if you had a shitty night of sleep or a bad night of sleep, sorry for swearing, then, that might affect your work day. And that's home life into work life. If you had a terrible day at the office, yeah, maybe you can go home and play with the kids and leave it at the office. But then that terrible day at the office is still going to be there tomorrow. So again, for me, working with clients, it goes back to, what would you like your experience to be? Some days I work with clients and all we do is we just talk about home life. And then the next session, that because we talked about home life and we were able to tackle stresses and anxieties, or I want to make sure that I'm home at 6:00 and playing with my kids and leaving work at work, which I know is important to a lot of people, then that comes back and actually affects work, because you are well rested. You played with your kids last night. You left work at work, and now you're back at work and being 100%. So, I don't think there's any overlap. I think it's just life being life, and us in a constant, sometimes it's a battle and a struggle to balance it all out. And sometimes it's a really fun game. Sometimes it's turning on music and having a lot of dance moves, and you get to do it all. And how exciting is that?
A lot of dance moves and high fives.
Yeah, that's how I like to live my life.
So Cecilia, let's talk about this third point then, this idea of then perspectives and attitudes outside of the ones that the founder, CEO, executive is bringing to the table.
Yeah. So this whole self-awareness with CEOs is really cool because it allows them to guide conversations. They end up being more proactive. So they are looking at the chessboard in a different way, is what I usually say. Instead of just feeling like I have to make the next move, they can turn the table and look at it above and below and kind of see where they want to move next. And that actually gives everybody else the opportunity to start doing the same thing, which is really cool to watch too. People start taking the cue and they start getting new perspectives and new attitudes. And then they end up getting to be in a more proactive culture instead of this reactive culture where this is how it is. Well, this is what the CEO said and this isn't going to change. And I know so many people who have said that in company culture. And I've worked in startups where we're trying to do great things and get this process going and it'll improve everybody else. But, at the end of the day, if the CEO says no, then, well, this is how it is. And again, getting that self-awareness and understanding your patterning, your belief system, why it is the way it is, allows for that to trickle down to everybody else so they can be more proactive, so they can have that freedom to get creative and think about problems in a different way that they might not have thought of before, instead of, well, I have to think about it the way the CEO is thinking about it because that's the only way I'm going to get this approved, which really starts getting very, very, very limiting. And when you get out of that mindset, when you actually get to say, hey, I think this is a great idea because of the experience I had, because of the amount of time I put into this, and the CEO knows like, oh, okay, I might not love this idea, but I want to believe in someone being proactive, in being creative, in XYZ, whatever it is, it makes room for just a lot more opportunity for companies to grow. And then, again, at the end of the day, it totally affects company culture, which is, I said before I was living my dream job, I work with CEOs to help company cultures thrive. My goal is to make sure that everyone's really happy where they work, because we're working a lot these days. And people don't work a 9 to 5 anymore. They get up at 4 and go for a run and start work at 5 and maybe take a break for lunch, and they're working till 9. And even Chad was telling me about his 12-hour days, but he loves his work. He loves what he does. And when people can love what they do, they can do beautiful, amazing things. And that is ultimately my goal by working with CEOs and executives, to make sure that they're self-aware, that they know their beliefs, they know what's going on, so that they can have a way more proactive, exciting, thriving company culture.
Yeah. Well, and it's a beautiful goal. I mean, and who wouldn't want to enhance their workplace where they spend so many of their waking hours? Like you said, people are not working a lot of traditional 9 to 5s anymore.
Nope,
so
not anymore.
Yeah. So Cecilia, this has been some fantastic content. I really do appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise with our listeners. If any of our listeners are interested in connecting with you after today's episode, learning a little bit more about, the content we talked about, learning a little bit more about how you work, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
LinkedIn is actually the best way to reach me at the moment. Cecilia Landholt, LinkedIn. I'm there. I'm on it. And if you write me a little note and let me know who you are, that's literally the best way to get in touch with me.
Perfect. Cecilia, thank you so much again for taking your time out of your schedule. It was a pleasure having you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.